I have observed some believers complain that praying in tongues is not working for them. From a human perspective, I totally understand why that can be the case. As a matter of fact, I have had periods in my life where I really struggled to pray in tongues. But because I chose to be a diligent believer, instead of complaining, I figured out how to enjoy praying in tongues. There is no way I'll struggle to pray in tongues while others are enjoying and getting results. I would swear to myself. Sure enough, as Jesus said, those who seek will find. I found a solution that made praying in tongues very enjoyable for me. The solution wasn't some rocket science from Mars. Instead, it was a very simple principle that the Bible teaches. Anyone with a functioning brain would easily spot the solution in the Bible. Implementing the solution might prove a bit difficult, but it is nowhere close to impossible. I implemented it when I was still a teenager. That will tell you that anyone can do it. I went from questioning if praying in tongues was worth it to praying in tongues daily. At the same time, my life greatly improved directly from praying in tongues. Today, I'll be sharing with you a straightforward solution that made praying in tongues very enjoyable for me. I first noticed a problem shortly after I received the gift of praying in tongues. You see, before I received the gift of praying in tongues, I had heard many testimonies of how powerful praying in tongues was. With that setup, would you blame me if I expected similar testimonies after I received the gift of praying in tongues? I wasn't alone either. My friends, who had also received the gift of praying in tongues, had a similar problem. Their expectation of having the gift of praying in tongues were not matching the reality of praying in tongues. As a result, some of them voiced their doubt in the gift of praying in tongues. Some who were very dramatic left the group altogether. Being a leader, I didn't want to show lack of faith in the gift of praying in tongues. However, deep down, I had similar concerns about the gift of praying in tongues. I couldn't show any result for the hours I was spending praying in tongues. Am I doing something wrong? Were those who are giving testimonies about praying in tongues lying? I would ask myself these and many other questions. After lingering in the dilemma for a while, I decided to do a test. My plan was to be as disciplined as humanly possible in praying in tongues to see if I would get any results. At the time, I was fairly disciplined, but I wanted to attain extreme levels of discipline. If praying in tongues wouldn't work after that, I would boldly proclaim it on rooftops. My test began with a rather unspiritual angle. I searched for the best books on discipline. I wanted to make praying in tongues a habit and push it to the extreme. I got a few self-help books and read them. On top of that, I read scriptures about discipline. I was not leaving any stone unturned. Whether by physical strength or spiritual power, I wanted praying in tongues to work for me. I learned a few great lessons from the much studying that I did. One was that an activity could only become a habit if I believed it was good. Quickly, I asked myself, Augustine, do you believe that praying in tongues is a good habit to have? I made sure to say an audible yes. 2, I quickly learned that starting a habit is often influenced by peers. Based on that finding, I decided to attend every prayer service I could afford. By frequently attending prayer services, I would give myself a good chance of picking up praying in tongues as a habit. 3, I learned that fasting was a good way for me to discipline myself spiritually. With that, I decided to do fasts as often as I could to supplement my efforts to make praying in tongues a habit. The plan was good, but it had its fair share of trouble. First, despite verbally confirming that praying in tongues was a good habit to have, I had a difficult time justifying my claim. Secondly, most of the prayer services were happening far away from where I was staying. This meant that I needed to spend a lot more money on bus fare if I was to attend all the services. Given that I was as poor as a church mouse, that was a high calling. On top of that, some prayer services happened overnight. That would mean staying up all night to pray in tongues. Given that I wasn't enjoying praying in tongues at the time, the thought of praying in tongues all night scared me. Lastly, fasting is not easy. I don't need to explain that one. Despite the challenges, I pushed myself as hard as I could to get the plan in motion. I attended very many prayer services. I would attend roughly 10 prayer services per week. Yes, on some days, I would attend 2 or 3 prayer services. I was on a level of dedication that would easily make the heavens come down. Interestingly, I never lacked money for bus fare as I thought would be the case. On top of that, I jumped on every fasting program in church. Whether the fasting was for the whole church or just for a department, I joined it. After all that effort, it came time for me to evaluate my progress. The first difference I noticed was that I had no problem praying in tongues on short notice. Previously, I would struggle to get started praying in tongues. Secondly, I noticed that the discouraging thoughts I was experiencing while praying in tongues were gone. Praying in tongues was no longer feeling difficult, though I couldn't say I was enjoying it yet. But that changed in one of the prayer services that I attended. In the prayer service, we started praying in tongues as usual. Unlike in previous prayer services, when the person leading the prayers would ask us to pause the prayers, I felt a strong push to continue. Each time, I was the last one to stop praying. After several pauses in the prayers, something interesting happened. In the next pause, when everyone else went quiet, I couldn't stop myself. Instead of calming down to a close, the tongues got louder and more vigorous. At that point, I stopped caring and went full blast. With no way to stop me, everyone else joined me in praying in tongues. I prayed continuously for about 2 hours before I finally managed to contain myself. After the prayers, I felt a certain level of peace and quiet I had never felt before. It was very sweet. I knew I had unlocked something great. Not only were my tongues feeling effortless, but they came with a very sweet feeling. I was curious to know what had changed. Sure enough, the Holy Spirit helped me to understand what had changed. You see, the Bible tells us in the book of Proverbs chapter 25 verse 28 that a man who lacks self-control is like a city whose walls are broken down. This means that for that man, anything goes. Previously, I had allowed my fleshly desires to dictate my life. Though I was trying to be disciplined, I wasn't good at it. When I decided to be fully disciplined, I became like a city with firm walls. The secure environment I had created within myself attracted the power of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit helps me understand that He regulates the amount of power He deposits in believers based on their level of discipline. A very disciplined believer, by default, gets more power from the Holy Spirit. This is a very basic principle that Jesus also mentioned in the book of Luke chapter 16 verse 10. With more power from the Holy Spirit, you will enjoy praying in tongues more. Sadly, some believers complain about praying in tongues not working for them when they have not cultivated any discipline. Cultivating discipline takes effort and its reward is very sweet. Therefore, if you want more power from the Holy Spirit when you pray in tongues, cultivate discipline in your life. God bless you.